So here we are in Acts 14. We're going to go through the whole chapter. Got to leave a lot out, but it's 28 verses. But it's interesting just to watch Paul's life on this missionary journey and see what's going on in his life that might not be going on in my life, your life. So let's do that. All right, so let's start Acts 14, verse 7. Now at Iconium, we're in southern Turkey. All right? They entered together into the Jewish synagogue and spoke in such a way that a great number of both Jews and Greeks believed. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brothers. So they remained for a long time, speaking boldly for the Lord, who bore witness to the word of his grace, granting signs and wonders to be done by their hands. But the people of the city were divided. Some sided with the Jews, some with the apostles, and when an attempt was made by both Gentiles and Jews with their rulers to mistreat them and to stone them, they learned of it and fled to Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and to the surrounding country, and there they continued to preach the gospel. Typically, you read those 7 verses, okay, move on to verse 8. But you always have to stop, pause, think a little bit about what's going on. But before I get into the text, let me just say that verse 6 is kind of huge. In the 19th century, listen, that's when the critics about the Bible really came into prominence, which we won't discuss the history of how the critics really came alive in the 19th century. But one of their texts that they hung on was verse 6, because it looks like Lystra and Derbe are in the same province. And everybody knows that's historically inaccurate. And listen, anytime you can find an inaccuracy in the Bible and you're a critic, you're loving life. So here's what one guy did. Now, not everybody does. Listen. Not every critic of the Bible is honest. Are you with me? They don't want to know the truth. So long as they can hang their hat on something, they're good. But a guy in England by the name of Sir William Ramsay was also a skeptic. And he looked at this verse and he said, man, Luke, he missed that. So here's what Ramsay did, and he wrote a book about it. He said, I'm going to take a trip and I'm going to journey in the footsteps of the Apostle Paul, because I want to show how inaccurate the book of Acts actually is. So when he got there, he discovered that Lystra and Derbe were in the same province between the years AD 37 and AD 72. The only time in the history of the book of Acts or Paul's journey was in the 40s. Wow. Now listen. Sir William Ramsay, one of the reasons he became a believer in Jesus Christ was because of this text. Wow. The Bible's accurate after all. And I think a lot of times we forget, even though people make a living criticizing the Bible. Listen, just wait. Maybe we don't have all the information yet. Hey, even last night, football game. One of the quarterbacks didn't get as much playing time. He threw like 8 passes. Another guy who nobody's ever heard of got like 25 passes. People were criticizing the coach until somebody said, oh, well, what happened was the other quarterback got hit in the shoulder and they decided to limit his play time. Oh, I got it. Well, now the criticism is gone. But just understand, If the Bible seems to be inaccurate, doesn't mean it's inaccurate. We just have limited information right now. Listen, archaeology is still going on. Shovels are still being turned in the Middle East. And it's like always, year after year, oh, something else comes to light. Something else comes to light. We could talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I'm not going to go into. It shed incredible light on the Old Testament. And they weren't found until the 1940s. In other words, some of the critics in the 19th century were long dead. And if they had been alive, they would have looked foolish. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Well, of course, there's opposition. And listen, nobody relishes opposition. You know, who would have thought when we started our project we would have had opposition? Nobody. We had one guy. One guy. Put us years behind. It was just incredible. One guy. But you know what? In a way, that's good. Because you might get the wrong idea. You know, you're going to run between a rock and a hard place. You know, we just sang the song. And I don't know why. I mean, it's an older song, but it's a great song. Where it says that we're desperate for Jesus in our lives. How many of us wake up every day desperate? Is that a bad thing? Well, yeah, but I just wish life was a lot smoother and I didn't wake up desperate every day. You know, as we keep going through the book of Acts, it's like Paul woke up desperate every day. You're like, why? He should have bailed, but he didn't. But opposition should never surprise us. Should never surprise us. So here's what I want to do. I want to just give you about 4 or 5 things that I noticed from the text. You know, it's just a story. It's just narrative. But here's what I know. Paul was using his gifts. So number 1, spiritual gifts. Spiritual gifts. Paul used his gift of teaching for ministry. 1 Corinthians 12:7. All your gifts, whatever gift you have, is to be used publicly for others. 1 Corinthians 12:7. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. It's for everybody. 1 Peter 4:10. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. So you have a gift, use it for others. You know, I was thinking about this as I was dealing with the text, and I'm thinking, wow, we could go on and on. So I think it's worth repeating. As far as spiritual gifts go, God made you with a purpose in mind. Now, keep in mind, the Apostle Paul was in his 30s before his experience on the road to Damascus. So he was in his 30s before he discovered his life's purpose. I know everybody wants to find it today. That's not that easy. But I do know this, God made you with a purpose in mind, and the only way to discover that purpose is to use the gifts, the talents, whatever God's given you at this time. And just think, what are we missing out on? Think about that. What am I missing out on? You know, the other week I shared a story, which I'm not going to repeat, about tithing. And one of our people had a tithing story. I shared it up on the property. And I think, wow, wonder how many people. I had this thought. I just had this thought. You know, I liked it. I can be as old as I am, or however you want to class, as young as I am, and still have thoughts. And I'm thinking, do you know less than 5% nationwide of believers tithe? I told Carol, because there are a lot of tithing stories. Now, God does this in different ways. He may surprise you with money, okay? But he might surprise you with a heat pump that lasts 5 years, longer than it should have. That's huge. I don't know, because God can do what he wants to do. But there are a lot of times when God honors the tithe with money. with something that happens monetarily. And so I shared one of those stories. And I've shared my story, which I'm not going to do now. And then I got to thinking, how much money is sitting in the divine bank and it's never going to be withdrawn? God's going to let it sit there because Joe didn't tithe, Susie didn't tithe, Amy didn't tithe, Scott didn't. I go on and come on, all kinds of names. I wonder how much money is just sitting on the sidelines not being used. They talk about this in economics all the time. How much money is sitting on the sidelines? People aren't investing it right now. People aren't doing it. I mean, wow. Then I think about prayer. Prayer. How many things are not experienced because we didn't pray? I'm not going to tell you today, but in the last few weeks I had a prayer answered. It was absolutely incredible. I think sometimes if I hadn't prayed, wow, for this particular thing, and I was specific. So I don't know, but I was just thinking about that as I read this text. Paul was using his gift, and look at all the people that benefited from his gift of teaching. Think of all the people. It's just incredible. And I just mentioned three things that are like obvious: spiritual gifts, tithing, and prayer. There's other things. Let's just keep going. How about number 2? Boldness. Boldness. Now, the old Star Trek show, I know, but I have to throw this out there. The motto was, boldly going where no man has gone before. Huh? Boldly. In other words, the theme of Star Trek is, we're going to go places other people never go because we're going boldly. Boldness. Boldness will take you places. Quick illustration. So, several years ago, we were at Mesa Verde National Park, camped for 2 nights, saw the ruins, the Indian ruins and all that. And at one particular place, you had to climb this ladder, and I don't know, how high was it, Savannah? 25 feet, 40 feet? Do you remember? Scary. Okay, whatever. Okay, so now Carol she doesn't like heights. This is kind of like her limit, okay? Until she had to help me on the garage. Now, I got her on 8. I've had her on a 10-foot ladder the other day. Oh, come on. That deserves a round of applause. But anyway, we'll move on. So she's my helper. She has to hold. I mean, what can I say? Okay, so anyway. So Carol said, well, you know what? I'm going to skip the ladder part. Okay. Okay, so she did. Then we came back and showed her pictures and all. She's like, you know what? I could have done that. And she was put out to this day that she did not boldly go up the ladder. She missed it. All right? Let's go to another place. We're down at the Cayman Islands, cruise shop, a stop. We go out to Stingray City. Okay, so in Stingray City, you get out of the boat. The water seemed like 5 feet deep. Stingrays everywhere. Okay, so we get back in the boat. And of course, the underwater picture that we paid for didn't turn out. Well, they refunded our money anyway. It doesn't matter anyway. Okay, so we get on the boat, go back. We just stop right there in the middle of the water. And the guy says, hey, feel free. You can just jump out, go down, and we'll sit here for a while, and then we'll go on back. So not everybody got out of the boat. Some of us did. I got out of the boat. Okay, now I'm not into deep ocean water. I can't see the bottom. Okay, so I get out of the boat, go 15, 20 feet. I dive down 3 feet. I'm good. Okay, back in the boat. We're all back in the boat but Carol. Where's Carol? I don't know. Can't see her. Carol had the boldness. She went way out. She's diving down like 50 feet or whatever, way down. And she comes face to face with a huge stingray where she could just reach out. The rest of us in the boat didn't have that experience because we weren't bold. I often think it's scary. What am I missing out on because of a lack of boldness? And see, you may not know. You may not know. We only had one person in the boat, and I don't know how many of us there were. 30 people? None of us had the boldness that Carol had. I thought, wow, I missed that. And so did everybody else on the boat. Incredible. Paul said we went to Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians 2. But though we had already suffered and been shamefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we had boldness in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in the midst of much conflict. Paul said, listen, the church, he told the church, he said, you wouldn't exist today if I didn't have boldness. Well, you're kidding. People would have not been reached. Wow. In writing to the church at Ephesus, Paul, this was huge in Paul's life. He asked the church, pray for me, that words may be given to me in opening my mouth boldly. Listen, you and I need to pray for one another that we will have boldness when it's needed. We just do. To proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I'm an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. Listen, Paul didn't want to miss out. All right? That's all. Boldness. All right, let's pick up the story here in verse 8. Okay? Now at Lystra, there was a man sitting who could not use his feet. He was crippled from birth. He had never walked. And he listened to Paul speaking, and Paul, looking intently at him and seeing that he had faith to be made well, said in a loud voice, stand upright on your feet. Listen, when you sit down for a long time, it's hard to get up sometimes, even though you're healthy. This guy, he hadn't gotten up in his entire life. He sprang up and began walking. Now this is an interesting passage. And when the crowd saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in Lycaonian. Now keep in mind, Paul didn't speak Lycaonian. He spoke Greek and Hebrew and understood some Aramaic. The gods have come down to us in the likeness of men. Now Paul doesn't know what they're saying. So they called Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes because he was the chief speaker. And the priest of Zeus, whose temple was at the entrance of the city, and everywhere you go over there, there's temples to Zeus, all right? But anyway. And so they brought oxen and garlands to the gates and wanted to offer sacrifice with the crowds. Paul still doesn't know what's going on, but he's beginning to catch on. And when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of it, they tore their garments. They couldn't believe that this crowd was going to actually sacrifice to them. See, they thought they were gods. You're like, wow, that's weird. No, hang with me. I'll give you the backstory. And Paul said, why are you doing this? We're just like you. We're men, and we bring you good news that you should turn from these vain things to a living God. Listen, God is the one who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that's in them. And in past generations, he allowed all the nations to walk in their own ways. Yet he's never left himself without a witness. He did good by giving you rains from heaven in fruitful seasons, satisfying your hearts. I mean, God's been so good to you over the years. And even with these words, they scarcely restrained the people from offering sacrifice to them. Well, here's the story. Now, if you have a good study Bible, it'll give you a little bit of the story. So what had happened, the legend was that years ago, two guys came to town. And the town was rude to them, inhospitable, except for one couple. And so the gods, this is how the story goes. You know how things go. You just start telling stories, and pretty soon it's like a fact or a legend. Okay, so, well, the other gods destroyed, wiped out the city like with a flood, but they took the couple's house and turned it into a temple, and it's great and all that. Okay, so now, with that backdrop, when the crowd now sees Paul and Barnabas, they're like, ooh, the gods have returned. We better be really, really good, so we're going to sacrifice to them. I mean, listen, these are just people that had no exposure to the law, the Old Testament, or anything. And so, I mean, here they are. Now, Paul and Barnabas reject the sacrifice. You with me? Now, if you are the people and they're not accepting your sacrifice, we've done all this, gone to all this trouble. You have humiliated us. You know, it's interesting how often humiliation can come up. Carol's sisters, they were in town this past week, and she was telling about a time they were overseas, and she and her daughter, a guy had an instrument, and I forget which instrument it was, and so she went over and put some coins in his cup. And you know what the guy did? He took the coins out of the cup and threw them back at her. He wanted bills, dollar bills. Well, this is in public, and you know, she felt humiliated. Incredible. Incredible. You think he'd have been thankful. I'm just saying. So I kind of get this. So they're rejecting what the people are doing, and now, I mean, the crowd's humiliated. Humiliated. And I suppose it happens a lot. Interesting story. Anyway, so number 3, let's talk about this. Another thing was personal evangelism. I mean, where do you start with someone who has no church background? I'm really amazed. Listen, I know there's really 3 crowds out there, at least. I mean, there is one crowd. They're kind of, you know, they're anti-church. I mean, look, church, no. Okay, then there's also a crowd that used to go to church, and this is huge. There's a lot of people who used to go to church, and they haven't gone 5, 10 years. But there's another crowd out there, and they're not anti-church. They never were church. Probably went a couple times when maybe they were a kid. They don't really have a recollection. And they're like, well, I really don't understand church, don't know church, you know what I mean? So you kind of have 3 crowds. So you're like, okay, so how do you approach someone like that? And, you know, I know I've shared before. I don't know how to explain church, and my time is often limited sometimes, so the best I can often say is, well, I'd like to just invite you to come see, and so on. Because I don't know what kind of press they've listened to, the stories they've heard, so everybody's shaped by the culture. Listen. Right now, you are sitting in your seat. You didn't know that. And you are sitting because of a thing called gravity. You didn't even think about gravity until just now when I said it. Because it's pulling you down to your seat. Well, no, I actually sat in my seat. You're able to do that because of gravity. Now, let me just share this with you. The culture has a pull on you that you are unaware of. It pulls your mind, and you think about stuff. And the culture is constantly saying some things until it pulls you in that direction, and you actually believe or think some things, and you have no idea. You think that you're thinking critically, but actually you're thinking culturally, and you're unaware of it. And I could give you example after example after example. Right? So Paul, when he's evangelizing here, you know what he brings up? Creation. Creation. Now, I don't have to tell you that the pull of evolution is strong. Okay? And if we did a poll, we might find you could get 10 scientists together, and 9 believe in evolution, and 1 believes in creation. I don't know. But do you understand the pull? I haven't done it. But one day, I'm going to go through the Bible because this is really intriguing me. How many times creation comes up? If you go to the Psalm 90, creation is used by the psalmist to turn our focus upon God and on His everlasting provision and presence. Take creation out, and we eliminate Psalm 90. Psalm 121 talks about because you can see all that God has made, you can be confident. And He will help you and enable you to come over any difficulty. That's what the doctrine of creation does for you. I'm always amazed when I run into a believer who doesn't believe in creation. I mean, here's why. The Bible says one day God's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. I mean, He's going to create again. So do you say that that's not going to happen? I just don't know. I'm really not sure. I'm telling you, the teaching of evolution undermines people's faith more than anything else. And yet the Bible says creation is good for your soul. Well, incredible. All right, let's move on. Acts 14, verse 19. So the Jews came from Antioch, they couldn't let it go, and Iconium, and having persuaded the crowd, see, there's the culture again, you see? These people, not even opposed to the Apostle Paul, are being influenced by the culture of their day. They don't know why they're against the Apostle Paul. They're being persuaded. And so they stoned Paul, stoned him, dragged him out of the city, supposing that he was dead. Incredible. Incredible. Now let's just pause there for a moment. If you're Paul, what would you do? I mean, you are pelted. I mean, I don't know how many stones they threw, but they figured he was dead. I mean, he got hit quite a bit. So you know he's bleeding. I mean, you know he's hurting. What do you do if you're the Apostle Paul? So he comes to. Now, I don't know how it was. It may have been humorous to an extent. You've seen these things. Maybe he was stoned and finally he just acted like, I don't know. But it would be fun to go back. And maybe we'll get to watch the video one day when we get to heaven. Maybe it was like this. And so Paul's standing there and he doesn't feel any more rocks. And he kind of opens one eye. All right. Are they gone? Are they gone? Okay, let's go. I don't know. It may have been they're like they had to help. I don't know. Wasn't there. Maybe they couldn't hardly get him up. Because I don't know what kind of sense of humor, and I don't know the pain. I just don't know. But it would have been fun to have been there. Not to be stoned, but to be looking at him. All right. So what was Paul thinking? You know, Ezekiel one time had a vision of a valley of dry bones, and he said, can these bones live? I mean, there's times when Ezekiel's like, not worth the effort. I don't know what went through Paul's mind. I just don't know. Sometimes it's hard to see something promising over the horizon. And what does Paul do? Look. Well, when the disciples gathered around him, he rose up, went back into the city, and on the next day, he took a 40-mile trip, a 40-mile walk with Barnabas to Derbe. And then they preached the gospel there and made disciples, and then they returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch. You know, I think we forget that sometimes people hated Jesus too. You know, I mean, listen, there's a lot of preaching out there that says if you love like Jesus loved, listen, society's going to love you a lot better. If you didn't love Jesus, I think we forget they actually put him on the cross. I would say that's because they didn't like him. You don't tend to crucify people you like. I mean, usually. Jesus said, if the world hates you, know that it's hated me before it hated you. So you need to get prepared. You think culture likes Christianity today? I don't have time. I could give you story after story after story after story after story of what Christians have had to go through, even in our own country, despite being persecuted and killed around the world in record numbers. Now, if I could go back to 2011, because Carol and I went on our cruise to celebrate our 30th anniversary. I forget. We're celebrating 33 this year. So this would have been 2013. We were going to Egypt. Well, what had happened? There had been an uprising in Egypt, and it had been unsafe for some time. And we thought, even as early as a month before we left, we would still be able to go to Egypt. Typically, things like when the Arab Spring rose up in Egypt, typically things like that take time. But do you realize today, with the power of Twitter and instantaneous news, culture goes in a particular direction, but it takes years, sometimes decades, for the tide to turn. Not anymore. Technology does not change the direction of the culture, it speeds up the culture. Same direction. All I'm telling you is the animosity towards Christianity, even in America, over the next 2 decades, will accelerate. And I'm going to tell you, and if you drop out of church in the next 10 or 20 years, put this in Evernote today. Mike said, I believe, no, I can't, it's not there yet. I believe most churches are going to lose their tax-exempt status in the next couple of decades. Now, I'm not saying we should have gotten it in the first place. That's a whole other issue. All I'm saying is, I don't have time to drill down. All I'm saying is it's going to accelerate. And listen, most of us have no idea how history is being rewritten. When Rome fell, everybody believed it was because of the disintegration of the family and the downward spiral of morality that led to the downfall of Rome. Edward Gibbons came along in the 1700s and rewrote that, and he said it was because of Christianity. That's what he said. He said it was because of religious silliness that Rome fell. You see what's going on here? And there are going to be people, and the voices will get louder and more common, that Christianity is hurting our country. It's setting us back. Now, we've survived as a country this long. I don't have time to do American history right now for a reason. The demise, and that sounds like a bad word, but I'm just telling you, it's being rewritten and people just accept it. Because people go in, and when they write history now, they come in with a viewpoint. And then they write according to the viewpoint. You don't get the facts, per se. You get somebody's viewpoint. Now, that's just the way it is. All right. I need to move on. But I see this in the text. All right? Because Jesus said, look, they're going to hate you. They're going to come out. That's just the way it has been, always will been. Acts 14. Well, let's get on back to the text. Strengthening the souls of the disciples, encouraging them to continue in the faith. I'm always amazed how often that comes up. And saying that through many tribulations, we must enter the kingdom of God. So they organized the churches, appointed elders. They had prayer and fasting before they chose them. And they went through the various towns. They eventually got back on the boat, went back to Antioch, been gone for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. They've traveled over 1,000 miles. That takes a long time to walk, even by boat. And they go back and they talk to the church about their journey and all that. But we get that, many tribulations. Now think of the Olympics. There are Olympians. They've gotten up early, 4:30, 5 o'clock, swam, run, whatever. Stuff nobody ever sees. Everybody saw him get that goal. They didn't see the years of training. That's the stuff nobody sees. That's the boring stuff. That's the repetitive stuff. But that's where the gold is won. You thought it was won on television, didn't you? No, that's not where that gold medal was won. Anybody could show up for a 2-minute race or a 1 minute. No, this was years and years of many tribulations. Well, Paul retraces his steps and talks about what he did, but here's number 5. He had a strategy. He had a strategy. I talk about New Hope strategy occasionally. I'm not going to do it this morning, but we took the word New Hope, the 2 words, and that's our 7-point strategy. And the letter N is natural outreach. And that's what Paul did. He went to a synagogue first. That's what he would do first if there was a synagogue. That was just natural for him, having been trained under Gamaliel. It was normal for him to do that. So he would go there, and it's natural to you. If you were to go out today and go get you a new car or a new used car, listen, you're not going to go into Starbucks at 9 a.m. in the morning and walk up to somebody, hey, let me tell you about the car I bought, are you? Would anybody do that? Would anybody in here do that? I wouldn't. No, but I might text a friend or call them or see, because that's not natural. But it is natural for me to tell somebody. And my feeling is if you got a new car or something, you tell somebody, right? Or if you got a new job or something, you tell somebody, but you particularly wouldn't walk into Starbucks or somewhere and just tell anybody. No, because that's not natural. So all of us in here should have a natural outreach strategy. Whatever it is, you should do it naturally. All right. Anyway. Nonetheless, so Paul went back, and so he strengthened the believers. It says in Acts 15:32 that he encouraged and strengthened the brothers with many words. So Paul strengthened believers with the word. I believe Sunday morning, one of the things it does, listen, when you lift weights, if you lift weights, and it strengthens your muscles, it doesn't happen overnight. When I was a sophomore in high school, it was in March. And I don't know, I was playing around with the weight machine in the gym at school, and another guy was standing there, and we were playing around, and I don't know what I was lifting. All right, maybe I was benching 175. I don't remember. I said, I'll bet you $5. That was back in the day of big money. I'll bet you $5 on the last day of school I'll bench 225. He said, ain't no way. Deal's on. So I just keep lifting weights. Now, you know what? The next day I didn't lift 225. I didn't know if I got anything that next day or not. But here's the deal. Last day of school, before we left, we weren't going to school anyway. You know how the last day of school is. It's not really school. It's just the last day of school, but you don't do anything. So I said, hey, let's go in the gym. So we went in the gym. I only had to lift it one time. No problem. And I always thought, I seriously, how many times? I don't know what I could have done. Because sometimes, I don't know if I could have done 230, but I did 225 was the best. I lifted 225. I'll never forget that. And so, but I didn't know what, and listen, you come Sunday morning and your soul is strengthened by being here and singing and listening to the teaching. When you walk out of here, you don't know. You can't feel it. You can't measure it. But your soul is strengthened. Well, Paul says one thing he did. He strengthened. He encouraged. He organized. And then he reminisced. He talked about his journeys. He talked about being stoned. He talked about the good and the bad. I wonder how much time do you spend reminiscing? Really? About what God's done in your life. Like if you go home and you have a cup of coffee or tea or root beer, which is really good if you get the right brand. And say, wow, that was so cool. I mean, how's your journey been? You go back, for me, I can go back to the time I was saved until today. And you know what? It's not a blowout every day. I mean, it's not hip, hip, hooray every day. There's a few along the way. I like to reminisce. You like to reminisce? Could it be that if just these few elements we talked about were not missing from your life, there would be more to reminisce about? Now, you know it's fun to reminisce. Because when you get together with your family and stuff, you know what you do a lot of the time? You reminisce. I hope you'll honestly evaluate your life today at these often missing elements and make them a part of your life so that, like the Apostle Paul, you'll be able to reminisce. Let's stand and pray.